Welcome to Deep World Updates. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. The news broke quietly, almost as if it was just another headline in a world already full of noise and uncertainty. But its impact was seismic, sending shockwaves through every corner of rural America. A digital message flashed across screens everywhere: U.S. soybean exports to China halted. In an instant, the unthinkable became reality. In just a matter of days, 88% of America's soybean exports vanished, evaporating into thin air. The market didn't just dip or stumble, it disappeared, as if someone had flipped a switch and turned off the lights. For farmers, this wasn't just news. It was the end of a way of life, a sudden rupture in the rhythm of generations. One day futures prices looked strong. The next, their biggest customer was gone, leaving only uncertainty and fear. The Chicago Board of Trade plunged into chaos as traders scrambled to make sense of the new reality, but the real pain was in the Midwest. Tractors idling, kitchen tables filled with worry, and families facing impossible choices. Generations of work, dreams, and sacrifice undone in a single week. This wasn't a slow decline, it was a sudden amputation of a vital economic artery, leaving communities reeling. Imagine a highway for commerce suddenly blocked. That's what happened to soybeans. Ships sat empty, trains stopped, the logistics chain froze in place. The silence was everywhere: canceled orders, idle trucks, and a sense of disbelief settling over the land. Farmers stared at unsellable crops, watching their hard work pile up with nowhere to go. Disbelief turned to dread. For years, farmers were told to plant more, invest more, feed the world. Now, those promises felt hollow. China wasn't just a customer, it was the customer, the lifeline for countless farms and rural businesses. Now, it was gone, and the fallout was just beginning to ripple through every small town and rural community. This crisis wasn't about numbers on a screen, it was about families and communities blindsided by forces far beyond their control, struggling to hold on to hope. The foundation of rural America had been pulled out from under it, leaving a void that no one knew how to fill. The shock was total, the future uncertain, and the questions outnumbered the answers. The American heartland was left to pick up the pieces, relying on resilience and community spirit to weather the storm. And the silence was only beginning, echoing across fields and towns, a reminder of all that had been lost, and all that was still at stake. The crisis began far from the fields, in the power corridors of Washington and Beijing. Decisions made in these distant capitals would soon ripple across the globe, setting off a chain reaction that no one could fully predict. The U.S. imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, aiming to protect American industries and address long-standing trade imbalances. The move was meant to boost domestic manufacturing and send a message about fair competition. China struck back, targeting American agriculture, especially soybeans, a crop at the heart of the Midwest economy. The retaliation was swift and strategic, hitting where it would hurt most. China, the largest buyer of U.S. soybeans, made them too expensive with tariffs. Suddenly, a market that American farmers had relied on for decades was out of reach. Chinese buyers turned to Brazil and Argentina overnight, forging new partnerships and shifting the global balance of trade. South American farmers saw opportunity, while Americans faced uncertainty. The U.S. went from preferred seller to last resort. Silos filled up, processing plants slowed, and the entire supply chain felt the shock. What started as a dispute over steel and tech put farmers on the front lines. The headlines were about industry, but the consequences landed in rural America. The impact was instant. Exports fell off a cliff, shipments stalled, and the numbers told a story of sudden loss. Contracts and logistics built over decades unraveled in days. Years of trust and planning were wiped away almost overnight. Farmers, ready for harvest, suddenly had nowhere to sell. Barns overflowed with unsold crops, and hope turned to anxiety. Prices crashed below the cost of production. For many, every bushel harvested meant a deeper financial hole. This wasn't a blip, it was a fundamental shift in global trade. Shipping routes changed and the world's supply chains were redrawn. Lifelong relationships and expertise meant nothing against geopolitics. Deals that once seemed certain vanished, leaving confusion and frustration. Farmers were powerless, caught in a storm they didn't create. Families gathered around kitchen tables, wondering how they would make it through. The trade war was no longer abstract, it was personal. Communities felt the strain, and uncertainty became the new normal. The face of the crisis was the American farmer, staring at a crop now worth less than the cost to grow it. Years of hard work and investment seemed to unravel in a single season. The rules had changed, and rural America was left reeling. The future was uncertain, and the impact of the trade war would be felt for years to come. In Iowa, the crisis was visible in overflowing grain silos. Symbols of abundance turned into monuments of loss. These silos, once a source of pride, now stood as silent reminders of a system gone awry, their contents unsellable and their purpose unfulfilled. With nowhere to store beans, farmers resorted to giant plastic bags stretching across fields. These makeshift solutions snaked across the landscape, a patchwork response to a problem that seemed to have no end in sight. The Miller family, 4 generations near Cedar Rapids, faced a devastating choice: sell at a loss or hold on and risk deeper debt. Each option carried its own heartbreak, threatening not just their livelihood, but the legacy they hoped to pass on. Every morning, John Miller stared at full bins, the silence heavy. The weight of uncertainty pressed on him, as he wondered how much longer he could hold out. His grandfather survived the Dust Bowl, but this was different, a man-made disaster. This time the enemy wasn't drought or wind, but policies and markets beyond their control. Banks grew wary, loans dried up, and planting next year looked impossible. The financial lifelines that once sustained rural communities were now fraying, leaving families to wonder if they'd see another season. The stress wasn't just financial, it was personal. Marriages strained, friendships tested, and the sense of community that once defined rural Iowa began to erode. Farming is identity, not just work, it's a calling, a way of life passed down through generations, rooted in the land and the rhythm of the seasons. Conversations shifted from weather to bankruptcy. The usual talk of rain and yields was replaced by worries about bills, auctions, and survival. Pride gave way to desperation. The strong, stoic faces of farmers now showed cracks, revealing the toll of relentless uncertainty. Across Iowa, optimism faded, replaced by anxiety. Once bustling main streets grew quiet, and the future felt more fragile than ever. Overflowing silos became paradoxes, evidence of hard work and market failure. They stood as both achievement and accusation, a testament to effort unrewarded. The real crisis was in the balance sheets and the hearts of those who fed the nation. Numbers told one story, but the pain in family photos and empty barns told another. The American dream felt buried under mountains of unsold soybeans. Hopes and futures were locked away, waiting for a market that might never return. For many, hope was running out. Each sunset brought more questions than answers, and the silence grew heavier with every passing day. The silence of the silos echoed the uncertainty of the future. In that quiet, the struggle of America's farmers spoke louder than words ever could. The crisis didn't stop at the farm, it hit the factories next. In Decatur, Illinois, soybean processing plants slowed, then cut shifts, then laid off workers. In Indiana, equipment manufacturers saw orders vanish, lots filled with unsold tractors. Hundreds lost jobs, their futures upended by a trade war far away. The ripple spread, diners emptied, mechanics lost business, grocery sales dropped. For workers like Mark, a lost job meant lost insurance, lost security, lost hope. The promise of a stable, middle-class life evaporated. As factories slowed, local economies spiraled down. Less spending meant more layoffs, shrinking tax bases, and cuts to schools and services. The crisis hollowed out the industrial Midwest. The silence in the factories matched the silence in the fields. One broken link in the chain threatened the whole system. The American economy's interdependence had never been clearer, or more fragile. In Minnesota and Nebraska, the economy's pulse is measured by trucks and trains. When soybeans stopped moving, so did the trucks. Owner-operators and small firms lost their busiest season overnight. Trucks sat idle, payments and bills piling up. For truckers like Dave, the open road became a dead end. Railroads too saw grain shipments plummet, leading to furloughs and layoffs. Suppliers and service businesses suffered as the slowdown rippled outward. The crisis was visible. Empty highways, silent rail yards, anxious truck stops. The arteries of commerce were clogged. The product was there, the infrastructure was there, but the destination was gone. The weight of unsold soybeans was now on those who moved them. The slowdown was a physical, undeniable sign of economic pain. The heartland's roads and rails had never felt so empty. In Missouri's small towns, Main Street is the heart of the community. When farm money dried up, so did Main Street's lifeblood. The decline was slow but relentless. Hardware stores, dealerships, diners all felt the pinch. Big purchases stopped, celebrations faded, and spending tightened. Schools faced budget crises as land values and tax revenues fell. The annual town festival was canceled for the first time in 50 years. Optimism gave way to quiet loss and uncertainty. The social fabric frayed, businesses closed, church pews emptied, for sale signs multiplied. The crisis didn't make national news, but it changed everything. Generations of community pride eroded, leaving Main Street a ghost of itself. The trade war's casualties were entire ways of life. In Kansas, the crisis hit young farmers hardest. Saddled with debt and high costs, they had no cushion. For couples like Sarah and Tom, dreams of running the family farm turned into nightmares. The risk of losing a century-old legacy was crushing. College plans for rural youth evaporated as family finances collapsed. Many delayed or abandoned higher education to help at home. The promise of upward mobility was broken. A generation of potential leaders and innovators was set back. The rural brain drain accelerated as young people left for uncertain futures. The generational gap widened, threatening the continuity of family farms. The horizon, once bright, was now clouded with doubt. The soybean collapse was a stone in a pond. Ripples spread everywhere. It wasn't just an ag crisis, it was a rural economic meltdown. First, support industries shrank. Seed, fertilizer, vets all felt the pain. Then, local governments faced falling tax revenues and tough choices. Layoffs, deferred repairs, closed libraries. Rural hospitals struggled as unpaid bills rose and mental health issues spiked. School funding dropped, class sizes grew, opportunities shrank. The institutions that held communities together were weakened. This was a slow, grinding erosion. No single disaster, just thousands of small tragedies. Families sold land, students gave up dreams, businesses dipped into savings. Each loss added to the decline. The spirit of rural America was being tested like never before. As the dust settles, the question is, what comes next? The old certainties are gone. The China market may never return. Farmers look for new buyers, but no one matches China's demand. Some try new crops or biofuels, but change is slow and costly. Communities rethink their futures, attracting new industries, investing in broadband, buying local. These efforts are vital, but can they counteract the crisis's scale? A darker future looms. If prices stay low, farm consolidation will accelerate. Family farms may vanish, replaced by corporate agriculture. The ripple effects, fewer families, shrinking schools, hollowed-out towns, could be irreversible. The heartland stands at a crossroads. Today's choices will shape generations. The future is uncertain, but the fight for survival continues.